morning. Is my mic live? Okay. First of all, you need to understand that even though 50 years sounds like a long time, the staffs at the two regional planning councils, Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and South Florida Regional Planning Council, have been working on this for 2 years already. And the executive committee, from all the partnership members, and the leaders, Mike Bush and Jim Murley of those regional planning councils, Marcel, have all been working like crazy on this to get us to this point. So join me in thanking them for the opportunity. Now what happens when I go to someone and say, 750? 7 counties, and they go, yes! And 50 years, and they say, what? 50 years? Victor, are you kidding? 50 years? I might not even still be alive in 50 years. 50 years is so long. How can that be the right planning horizon? So I hope to give you some inspiration over the next few minutes as to why 50 years is a great time frame. It's a little longer than all the official, perfunctory, gotta do it plans that always get made. Which means we can get out in front of them and share with them your combined vision and guide them on their efforts. That's one reason. It also, you will remember the old saying, Rome's not open today. So, 50 years, going to the eye in architectural time, on red wine on Kohl. So we're going to take that at its guide and look at that for a minute. Now, 2016, it's a really, really long time, so let's look back. 50 years. How do I know for sure that's not very long? Because I stand before you as someone who was conceived 50 years ago. And I am just a working bride. I'm not done yet. I'll tell you a few things about 1962 and the way they viewed the future in 1962 to get me thinking about how you want people 50 years from now to look back on our efforts. And some of it will make you laugh. Some of it will make you cry. It turns out that 1962 was a pretty interesting time, especially on the left here, in our region, because we were the object of fascination for people all over the world. And things were happening in 1962 that were pretty interesting. You know, John Glenn orbiting and so on. And the first Kohl, for example, in 1962. Now, in our area, some things happened that are pretty amazing as well. Did you know, according to the recent book, 1 Minute to Midnight, that in South Florida and the Keys, in October of 1962, the troop and military and material buildup was bigger than the one in England prior to the Normandy invasion in D-Day. And they were sitting ready for either World War III or the end of the world. And what a difference today makes? I did ask for permission to reveal this. My wife, you know there, and I were actually born during October 1962. Our mothers were both in the hospital, mine in North Carolina and hers in Havana, on the other side of the Caribbean Iron Curtain during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we know, we're actually evidence, that things can change in 50 years. Now, 50 years ago, Southeast Florida was sold, packaged in a way. And the story that it told was one about the built environment, about the place, the way our tourism officials described the experience you had here was by showing images of the place, like the spectacular hotels and Miami Beach, or the spectacular experiences you can have in our beaches and in our freshwater frontiers. And we also, because we were all working together on a vision at that time of getting to Futurama on wheels, we also sold our world around happy motoring. Remember those old Esso and then Exxon gas station signs, happy motoring? Happy motoring was was the theme behind planning and even futurism in those days. Now, other things were going on. This was a time of phenomenal cultural shift. Art was reinvented. Cinema was reinvented. Television reinvented. Music reinvented in that time. And if for those who are in the room who are old enough to remember, and I even am, Jackie Gleason. What did they show when they said, live from Miami Beach, it's the Jackie Gleason show? They showed a picture of our built environment. Okay, that signature image of the hotels along the beach
as seen from across the water. That's how they described it. When, moving ahead just a little to 1964, when they filmed Goldfinger, what did they show in the James Bond movie? In popular culture at that time, they showed the Fontainebleau Hotel. They described our built environment as the key feature. So I'm going to ask you to zoom in on 1962 for a minute more, dive in with me, and think about what was different. We had high-rise buildings, we had high-rise hair. Some things were different. Okay, so things changed in 50 years. But we had word processors, we had iPods. I think that's an iPod right there. I'm pretty sure that is a microwave up at the top center, because it's making popcorn. It must be what that is. The little devices and things we used in our day-to-day lives were different from the ones we use now, right? But we were constantly reinventing, and we were fascinated in that time as we're fascinated now with our machines. In fact, here's from Amazing Stories a picture of yesterday's tomorrows, the giant plastic, metal, and unbreakable glass city of the 21st century. It's just like what we're living, right? Okay. All right, so we used to be, as a nation, and even as a world population, really pretty good at fantasizing about visions of the future. And I would argue that the way we describe our future is one of the ways we define ourselves as a society or as a people. You are about to do that starting today for 7 counties over the next 50 years. Now, the visions can be astounding. The Seattle World's Fair sent a message that said, don't worry about the congestion, because if we just add enough monorails, and we'll somehow get everybody moving where they want to go. And Disney imagined that we could get out of the old and congested city and just, look, no traffic at all. This is the free-flowing condition that the traffic engineers hoped we would get to if we could just build the roads fast enough and wide enough. It'll be like magic. Well, okay. Turns out we didn't get all that done. And some of those magic bullet sorts of solutions didn't actually turn out all that well. It's plenty of time to do a lot of things, however. In 50 years, in that 50 years, really falling off the cliff of change in 1962, we had a successful civil rights movement. We had the birth of the modern environmental movement. We had the maturing of the women's movement. We had the dawn of a space age, and then an information age. You see how much change? Lots of change. We had an amazing, game-changing immigration story in South Florida, and Southeast Florida, all of Florida. That means now we have a different day. And we have new challenges. But throughout those processes, one of the things people had to do was build place. They had to work out their plans for culture, for jobs and prosperity, for land use, for housing, for transportation. Some of those plans work better than others. We have a lot of before and after pictures. For anybody who would like to be thrilled and chilled by the shocking before and after pictures, here are just a few. Deerfield Beach in 1960s, Deerfield Beach in 2012. Or let's say Kendall. You ready for this? It's a lot of time. In 50 years, we will see an amazing amount of reconstruction and construction, not necessarily, depending on what we all think together, more sprawl or more paving of the Everglades to find room to build, more loss of farmland, but we will be rebuilding in the places we've already started. We'll be taking the slipshod sprawl that has been kind of thrown together because it's built so quickly and so thinly, and transforming it in our era. I predict that the retrofitting of suburbia and the retrofitting of our suburbanized downtowns will be the defining act of placemaking during the coming 50 years. Now, you probably recognize this image. This is downtown West Palm Beach and City Place. And so if you squint at that image for a minute, you're going to see a lot of areas that were raised and turned into open parking lots and so on. But wait, the movie began to change. Things began to fill back in. Blocks began to be used again as addresses for placemaking. And so bit by bit, we're rebuilding already. It's been happening in the before and after. So why we care so much? Why make a plan? Not to sound like a con man, but a plan is a tool for establishing confidence. That's what we're trying to do. If we have a plan that says this is what we want to be when we grow up in Indian River County, this is what we want to be when we grow up in South Miami, then everyone who invests, like private industry, like the federal government, like the state government, like the cooperating region, everyone who invests can know that their little action they're taking right now fits into a bigger puzzle, a bigger picture that we are trying to build. That's the reason we do it. Now, as long as we're in the time machine, Americans have historically been extremely good at this, at visualizing the future, maybe even in a little bit of a fantastic or utopian way like the cartoon showed, or maybe in a very practical way that turns out to transcend short-term trends. For example, when Oglethorpe settled Savannah, imagine the uncertainty. What if he had said to the king, "We can't plan yet, sir, excuse me, Your Majesty, we don't know what's going to happen." That wouldn't have worked. At the moment when they were ripping the town out of the wilderness and fighting snakes and angry natives and mosquitoes and so on, they had a general idea about what the place was supposed to be like physically when it grew up. They drew lines on a map that reverberate for centuries in their impact. So whatever lines you draw over the next year and a half in the 750 maps, those lines will reverberate for a very long time. Think of Savannah now. The basic framework of that crude settlement you saw was able to mature around the basic genius of that plan into a place that is identifiable to all of us as the postcard picture of a region and its people. Okay? Just to be a little more recent about things, when I look at L'Enfant's plan for Washington, I noticed that L'Enfant was not constrained, not shackled by short-term trends. Now, with all apologies to the economists and others who are going to make presentations later today, L'Enfant did not know exactly where the jobs were going to come from in the future. He didn't know there would be an industrial revolution, didn't know there would be cars, didn't know there would be women in the workplace, didn't know there would be email, okay? And he did not need to know. Because what L'Enfant drew was an idea of great addresses that respond to more timeless things, an idea for how the land meets the water, an idea for where the most important public spaces are and what their quality should be. And that is as important as any charts or numbers we can generate. Can you imagine how silly it would have been for L'Enfant to walk in to see President Washington and Mr. Jefferson and lay out a big fat book that said, Vision 1841. He didn't do that. Instead, he drew a map of the way the place was supposed to be. Americans have been really good at this, even on the regional basis. You probably know Daniel Burnham's famous plan for Chicago. High point of American city planning history, 1909. They say, Burnham said, make no little plans. Heard that before? Make no small plans. The rest of the quote is, they have no magic to stir men's blood. Well, it turns out there actually is no documented evidence that Daniel Burnham himself ever said or wrote that, but it's a great legend, isn't it? So we're going to give him credit for it anyway. They were big picture thinkers. Yes, he was designing the waterfront Chicago, but he's also designing a regional plan, an idea for land use and transportation and the big picture. And they were responding to specific dangerous challenges that Chicago had burned in their recent memory, right? And what they did in these old plans is respond to those unprecedented challenges with ideas for making great places. They were responding to challenges like the Industrial Revolution, which was filling the cities at that time with people and toxicity, and they had to think of a way to improve the public health, safety, and welfare by drawing lines on a map, by actually choosing, by retaining flexibility on things that are important and actually becoming certain about the 4 or 5 things that were most important to them. This idea of drawing an audacious plan that, my goodness, extends across 7 counties, that's nothing compared to Benton MacKay's plan for the Appalachian Trail, which extended across state boundaries and a quarter of the continent for the Appalachian Trail. And that was in the 1920s. They didn't have remote sensing or satellite photography or geographic information systems or any of that. Or consider the Regional Plan Association's regional plan for New York and its environs from the late 1920s. A big picture plan with lots of information about the individual municipalities and their attitudes. Floridians have also taken that kind of leadership role. Many of you probably know that this year we lost the late, great Dr. John DeGrove, the father of growth management. And I heard Dr. DeGrove say on many occasions this, that all development, and then he would pause and repeat for emphasis, all development is a public-private partnership. And that is a reality that 750 will take into account. And we can thank people like Dr. DeGrove for guiding us with that. So 1962 wasn't all that long ago after all. We get to where we are, and we have some work to do. Here's how we do it. First, we face facts about some things that are troubling us. When we asked many of you, when you registered on our website, and the first couple hundred people's responses are recorded here, how they would describe us, they said, a work in progress with lots of work to do. That describes our region. And the reason is because during that 50-year period, we built a lot of things halfway that have to be fixed. For example, things that had built into them a recipe for maximizing traffic congestion. That is, low-density sprawl, separated uses, disconnected patterns. Now we have to fix that in order to have more transportation choice and better quality of life, and so that we're not always stuck in traffic. Turns out we have to also address things like global climate instability or climate change and sea level rise. And we have to do our part to do the right things if we want other regions to slow the pace of global warming by doing the right things. And for example, that means learning that to drop our carbon footprints, we need to live interdependently and closer together with one another. Not that much, but a little bit will make a big difference in our carbon footprints. We need to connect. If we have just a few more intersections, instead of a disconnected tree of sprawl, an interconnected web of town, our carbon footprints will drop. And then we can honestly say to those people we need help from on addressing our sea level rise issues and so on, that we're doing our part. What about mixing uses? Remember the old separated use thing was about maximizing traffic. You don't have to have very much mixed use to make a big difference in your carbon footprint. So we'll be looking at those kinds of issues and how they can be incorporated. Want another emergency, since that doesn't seem hard enough? What about the obesity epidemic, the hypertension epidemic, the diabetes epidemic, the teen suicide epidemic? You go on and on and on. Our public health crisis is actually generated in part by our urban form. What will we do in this plan to address this issue? What about the demographic shifts that are so cataclysmic? As the baby boomers age and the millennials come of age, they're cresting over the next several years. In fact, in the early years of our 2062 plan, we're going to have to address the fact that our housing needs will be different. There will be a surplus of single-family detached houses in all likelihood in this nation, and there will be an undersupply of the hip and creative places that people generating tech-savvy, interesting new jobs want to live. There's this issue about boomers in our region aging and still driving. Now, part of the recipe involves facing what we didn't quite get right with the visionary plans of the last couple of generations. I'm sure you recognize this kind of map: yellow for residential, orange for multifamily, red for commercial, and so on. Just in case their acronym is lost on you, this is the land use designation map of the future land use element of the Comprehensive Development Master Plan for Florida Stature's Local Government Comprehensive Planning Act of 1985. Okay? It's all there, right? Even the circle for a thing called activity center, we went there to see. Turns out the activities are mostly driving and road widening. So we have some of this to fix in our official plans. 750 can show the local governments a path forward on updating and improving their own independent, no longer state-supervised planning efforts. So when we asked our poll respondents to identify some of the things they'd like to see in the future, a few things really stuck out. They said more unified as a region. They said more environmentally sustainable. They said more economically resilient, like L'Enfant's plan, for what it's worth. We have a deadline. Last couple thoughts. We have to turn this thing in 2014, and we are going to meet that deadline. So you have to get engaged and stay engaged and help us make it across the finish line. That's not much time to do a plan this big. The method by which we're going to gather includes 4 summits like this one. This is the first. There will be 3 more, including one in January, is it, Marcella? So watch for those dates and locations of our January Summit 2. And between will be doing a lot of things to inform you. We have a crack computer modeling and research team working with the government agencies and institutions on modeling the future alternatives, including projecting forward the current trends and expectations if we do nothing, and alternative visions to see which ones work better. So we can present that to you. That's going to be very sophisticated, and it will all go into a thing called a data warehouse. There will be a permanent legacy after 750 plan is complete. All of the research that's being gathered for this project will be accessible through one portal we're calling the data warehouse. We have 6 work groups. See the flags? Those are education, workforce, and economic development, shortened here to economy for our flag space. They are climate resilience. They are development patterns, which is a big one. It includes housing, land use, transportation. Environment, agriculture, and natural resources. I thought somebody might notice I put a tractor next to the word environment just to see if we could provoke any discussion. And then community assets and culture. And the 6th one is inclusive regional leadership and equity. So these are groups that are going to be meeting in the rooms around this building and in the gymnasium at lunch, when we have our working lunch. You'll be able to choose one of these groups, go where the flag is, and work in small groups to produce highlights for later. Now, today's about starting the conversation that continues online and in those work groups in the months coming forward. And there are a lot of cool ways to do this. We've built, with the help of Roar Media, an amazing website. I hope you've all looked at it by now. It just launched a week or 10 days ago, and it's already full of information. But on that website, not only are there headlines and links to all of the important data, but there is a way to engage. There are lots of ways to engage. Click on that and drop it down. You can find information about meetings. You can jump into an online forum for each of our work groups and leave comments or replies, raise a topic. You can participate in a poll, like the first one we've tested. We'll be bringing those out regularly. And you can connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. So today, if you tweet, your tweets will go live, and they'll show up in the lobby, and they'll also show up throughout cyberspace. Or if you go on Facebook and you like this, you'll get updates via your Facebook as well, and you'll have the opportunity to take the little recordings that you do at the video terminals on either end of the hallway out here and post them, so that you can send them to your Facebook friends and they can see what your 30-second snapshot of the vision of the future is. So today you start the conversation. Thank you very much.